Hello, and welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, with a Judeo Christian worldview and values, and real world first hand experience. As always, I'm your host, Michael Melito. Today's episode is going to be a short episode on a single topic, one cartridge, the 357 Magnum. We'll obviously talk about a few others for history and comparison's sake, but the main topic is about the 357 Magnum. I'll just speak off the cuff today, shoot from the hip on the bio, things that God has blessed me and gotten me through in life. If this is your first time listening, you go back and listen to a longer episode, a full-length episode, and it'll give you a more complete bio. First and foremost, I'm a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life and everything that I do, and I don't want this podcast to be any different. All that I have, all that I've done, is by God's leave, by God's grace. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. After my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor and desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. Also served the United States Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. My primary MOS in both branches was infantry. Also served with the LAPD, law enforcement officer, regular assignments, and more specialized assignments. So by God's grace, as a professional gunfighter, made it through war zones and some of the nastiest streets in the country. Not because I deserve it or because I'm better, but because only as a gift from God. Started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps, state rifle and pistol champion a few times over. I'm very blessed with those talents and try to use them. Won more shooting competitions than I can remember. Also professional firearms instructor for a lot of years, FBI certified, NRA certified, and some other certifications. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify, and I've hunted all over this beautiful country and been a professional hunter and guide of all kinds and slayed all manner of beast. With that, let's get into today's topic. The 357 Magnum, my favorite Magnum. On this episode of Better Know a Cartridge, I don't know why it's taken me so long to talk about this cartridge. If I'm carrying a full-size duty gun on my hip, whether it's the leader of a tactical team, my current job running a firearms and training company, generally a full-size double-stacked STI 1911 derivative. But if I'm concealed carrying, the most likely gun you'll find on me is a Smith & Wesson 360 PD, which is a 357 Magnum ultralight scandium frame gun. It is a fantastic gun. The 357 Magnum is a fantastic cartridge. I've done quite a bit of handgun hunting. I've been blessed to take more animals with a handgun than I can honestly remember. I've been blessed to take deer and coyote, and I don't even remember what else, with 357 Magnum. The 357 Magnum is a fantastic cartridge. And if you were going to pick one cartridge for all around, survival handgun, end of the world handgun, prepping handgun that cross the divide between both hunting and self-defense, the 357 would probably be my number one choice. It would be between that and a 10mm. I may choose a 10mm because most of my practice and most of my shooting comes in the 1911. That's the platform that I've kind of gone with as being the one that I shoot the best, so I may go with the 10mm, but the 357 Magnum might be my number one choice. If that was the case, then I would just shoot a revolver more. But the 357 Magnum is a fantastic cartridge. And any revolver that shoots a 357 Magnum will also shoot the 38 Special, which will bring us into the history. 38 Special has been around since the black powder days. It's a phenomenal cartridge. It's still a good self-defense cartridge. It was used by the police for a lot of years, a lot of decades. In fact, when I joined the police force some years ago, there were still men carrying revolvers. And for a long time, those revolvers were 38 Specials. That was like the go-to American police round. And put a lot of men in the dirt, and it still will do so today. They started loading up 38 Special to make it hotter and more powerful. And when they got to a point where it was pretty hot and pretty powerful, they lengthened it a little bit so it wouldn't blow up the older guns that couldn't handle it. and they dubbed it the 357 Magnum. Good thing I looked it up. I thought it came out in the 50s. It actually came out in 1934, apparently. So quite a long history. As one of the designers, it lists Elmer Keith, which is pretty cool. Not familiar with him, kind of a prolific name in the handgunning world that you might consider one of the, as a millennial term, influencers of the handgunning world of, times of yore. Kind of its classic quintessential load that it's known for as, having really good one-shot stops as far as defensive shootings go is kind of your classic 125 grain bullet. And I'm not going to give any exact data, but that's 125 grain bullet is going to be cooking at about 1,400 feet a second. Consider that with your standard, what I would consider the most common 9mm load, which is going to be, a 115 grain bullet at 11 to 1,200 feet a second. And again, the 357 Magnum is going 125 grain at 1,400 feet a second. Again, that's a pretty standard load from decades past. You can get some harder, crazier buffalo board stuff or hand load stuff hotter, especially if you have something like a Ruger. But that's kind of your classic load. And you can load heavier bullets, and you can load stuff hotter, or you can load stuff lighter. That's kind of your classic. And that's a powerhouse for a handgun. A lot of people think that the 44 is great for handgun hunting, and it is, but we got to remember that before the 44 mag, the 357 was used to take all manner of beasts in this country, and it's not like those beasts have been taking steroids. It's not like they're dramatically different than they were when they were taken with the 357 Magnum. The 357 Magnum is an awesome round, and unlike the 44, which generally is chambered in very large frame handguns, the 357 can be chambered in pocket handguns like your classic Smith & Wesson J-frame, which I talked about earlier, to, a full-size handgun that's not too big to be carried for defense, for a, day-to-day sidearm. And that's the big advantage of the 357 over the 44. It might not be as powerful, but it's plenty powerful, and you can pack it in a, what I would consider, sane, rational size carry gun. In fact, the one that I have, the 360 PD, is listed as having a weight of 11.7 ounces. We think of something like the SIG 365, which is like the new hotness, either that or the Springfield Hellcat, and, concealed carry, defensive gun, the new hot thing. Well, that thing weighs, I just looked it up, the specs on that is 18 ounces. My 357 may not hold as many rounds, but it's more powerful, and it weighs 11 ounces. I mean, I go running with the thing, and it's a powerhouse. And that's the advantage of the 357, I think, is that it can be in a normal-sized handgun. Now let's talk about some really cool guns chambered in the 357. I mentioned my favorite, the 360 PD, or the 340 PD is a similar version of that. I don't like it as much, but the 360 PD I really like. Also, I believe the Smith & Wesson Night Guards that came out, anything in the Scandium frame, Smith & Wessons I think are cool. Obviously, you can't go unmentioned the Colt Python. Colt Python is like the quintessential iconic 357 Magnum gun. Either the old one or the re-released new one. They're probably both good. I know the old ones are fantastic. I've handled those before. Also, if you didn't know the original, I believe the original chambering of the Desert Eagle was in 357 Magnum. And likewise, I mentioned a 1911. Well, there's a 1911-ish based gun called the Kunin, and that's in 357 Magnum. The 357 Magnum Kunin is a pretty cool gun. I don't think I've ever actually seen one in person or laid hands on one, but it's kind of a 1911-ish gun, is very much based on that design. The dimensions obviously can't be the same because the 357 Magnum is bigger, at least longer, than the 45 ACP, but a cool gun nonetheless. In rifles, your Marlin and Winchester rifles chambered in the 357 Magnum are really cool, fantastic guns. The Ruger GP100 Match Champion, to be specific. I've owned a couple of GP100s. I owned a Match Champion, and I sold it, and I kind of wish I'd kept it because it was a freaking awesome gun. Although, this is gunfighter life. I'm not into keeping guns that I don't use that often, and at the time I wasn't using it. If I had it now, I'd probably use it more. But in the place and time where I was in, I really didn't need it, so I sold it. But an awesome gun. If you're looking for a good, full-size 357 Magnum crossover gun, for all kinds of things from competition to hunting to defense, the Ruger Match Champion GP100 would be pretty cool. Also from Ruger, they make a polymer frame gun, which is pretty cool. The LCR, they make it in 357 Magnum. They also make it with a hammer. I prefer the guns with the hammer. Some people don't. For defense, that's their call. But a cool gun. And if you're on a budget, Taurus made a polymer frame 357 Magnum. It was super light. Maybe not as light as a 357 or as a 360 PD that I liked, but that's a $900 gun that I've had for a long time, and a lot of people can't afford that. If you're looking on a budget, Taurus made a light one, polymer frame 357, that's about the same size and fairly light, and for a couple of $100, that's a really cool gun too. Anyway, guys, I hope you've liked this short episode, Better Know a Cartridge on the 357 Magnum. Tactical tip of the day is going to be on revolvers. Now, a lot of people think revolvers are simple. If you ever take one apart and look inside it, it is not simple inside. It's simple for the user to operate, but not simple mechanically. They're fairly complex mechanically, especially your more common double-action revolvers. So if you're going to clean those, you really have to, I'd advise not fully disassembling them. So a way to clean those is some 90% alcohol, rubbing alcohol like you would use for medical purposes, and pouring that in there and getting the action clean and then spraying it with something like Rem oil. Carry those guns a lot. They can get dirty. That's a good way to clean them unless you have to, or unless you really know what you're doing with like a Smith & Wesson or similar style revolver. It's quite a bit of work to get those things apart and back together. So the rubbing alcohol and then any kind of spray lubricant, kind of your standard one you're going to find at Walmart, is probably Rem oil. Anyway, with that, guys, thanks for listening to Gunfighter Life. I hope you enjoyed this short episode on a single cartridge. Seems like you guys really do. If you like this podcast, you may also like the Alpha Male podcast. And if you care about the important stuff, Simple Man Sermons, the preachings of a simple man, called by God to share the good news of Jesus Christ. You can find all that and more visual stuff, pictures at goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. If you like this content, you think it's worth $1, consider going there, scrolling down to Patreon and supporting. These podcasts are free for you to listen to, and I like it that way, but sadly, they're not free to put out and produce. So if you want to help support for the fraction of the cost of a box of ammo, please consider doing that. Thanks, and have a blessed day.